I rise in opposition to 4643. I'm particularly disturbed by this bill because I remember the stories of my elders and those of the ancestors who unfortunately didn't earn their rights, recognition, or respect solely through civil protest. I'm particularly disturbed by this bill to see this type of oppressive, regressive, and egregious legislation before us today in this day and age. And maybe it's because I remember that last year in this chamber, we celebrated and acknowledged the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That act eliminated barriers that prevented African Americans from voting. And a year before that, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the men and women who fought for those rights. People like Rosa Parks, Nicholas Hood Sr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Viola Liuzzo, A. Philip Randolph, Daisy Bates, Paul Robeson, Dick Gregory, and I can go on and on. The bills, or that landmark legislation, didn't pass because we had polite protesters. Because if you remember that history, we tried that. We tried the civilized and civil protest, and we did it on buses and bridges, at lunch counters and in churches. And those protesters were attacked by dogs, beaten, water hosed down, arrested, and in some cases even murdered. I am deeply appalled by these bills. Maybe because I grew up in a union household and I once walked the Teamster picket line with my mother as a child. And it was a safe environment to bring her young daughter into that situation. And I actually had fun on that picket line. Or maybe it's because I have a master's degree in human resources and I understand the contributions of organized labor and the labor movement. And how without organized labor and the labor movement, we would not have the human resources and the labor laws that we have on the books today. Or maybe it's because when I was in college, I led a sit-in, and I actually kind of blocked the hallway with my group. Because at my college, they were very good at coming into urban communities and recruiting African Americans to play sports and win championships for the college. But we did not have diversity and inclusion anywhere within the ranks of our faculty and staff. I'm appalled by these bills because to get through college, I worked in housekeeping. I cleaned the bathrooms and pulled the trash and vacuumed the floors. And I know what it takes and the sacrifice that those workers have to endure, only to later grow up and become a union organizer and work on a Justice for Janitors campaign. And then you really understand how critically important our housekeeping and staff is, how critically important they are, but how casually dismissed. Or maybe I'm just appalled because not too long ago I remember bringing food to American Axle workers who were on strike and who tried to follow all the rules and not break anything so that the judge wouldn't rule against them. This is the context from which I view these bills. They are particularly dangerous to our American values and an insult on democracy itself. But if that real human face, that soft Philly stuff doesn't really get to you, I think my colleague explained it very well. The problems with House Bill 4643 is more than just a human thing if you don't really care about the human context here. We already know that this is an Employee Relations Commission Act amendment, and we know that it's currently illegal for mass pickets in front of businesses or private residents for certain types of those pickets and protests. And the penalty is a misdemeanor with 93 days and a $500 fine. These bills increase those penalties to $1,000 per person per day and $10,000 to the organization or union who is the sponsor or organizer of that event. But that's not all. It gets worse. It allows employers and individuals to seek injunctive relief if they're subject to striking activity or protest. This allows employers to stop picketers without having to show any proof that there's been harm to that person. And so how that affects the protester, the picketer, or the striking individual who's fighting for their rights is that $1,000 per person per day. And that $10,000 per day for that organization. I asked the bill sponsor if these bills were introduced simply to neuter protesters. The response was, I wouldn't characterize it that way, Representative, but yes. Ooh, what a dangerous, slippery slope we're on when elected lawmakers start suppressing the people's voice. We should never take our civil protest and our civil protesters for granted. There are already penalties for this law, fines. These fines are $1,000 per person per day, $10,000 for the organizers of these protests, strikes, or pickets. This is what you do to vampires. You shoot them with a silver bullet, then stab them through the heart with a wooden stake. And any vote in support of this legislation makes it seem like you're the bloodsuckers. These are people, not vampires. These are children with lead poisoning. These are women who want equal pay for equal work. These are our first responders, our police officers, and our firefighters. These are our college students and right-to-lifers. Our right-to-lifers. Well, I got somebody's attention. So maybe we have a new way to fund Planned Parenthood. House Bill 4643 is overreaching, unnecessary, egregious, oppressive, and un-American. Colleagues, I ask that you show the workers of this state some love and respect and vote no on House Bill 4643.